Professor
Yeah,
David, this is the Global Digest think tank group. Where
yeah.
are you now?
I'm mostly based in Indonesia, in Jakarta. My full-time job now is I'm a research professor at the Research Center for Politics, the National Research and Innovation Agency, or BRIN, in Jakarta. I've also worked in the government. I worked with President Habibie and as deputy to Vice President Budiono during President Yudhoyono's presidency, and to
Right.
deputy to Vice President Yusuf Kala during President Jokowi's first term. But now I'm fully back in academia. I'm temporarily in Malaysia. I've been appointed as what is called Port Rafiah chairholder, as a visiting professor, a chair at the Institute of Malaysian and International Studies, the National University of Malaysia, or ICMAS UKM, from April to October 2025. Yeah, and I mostly my work is mostly on foreign policy, Indonesian foreign policy, on ASEAN political security issues. So that's my primary focus, and of
Great.
course we look into Myanmar as one of our.
Right. ASEAN is complicated, right? And I've been talking with many professor and scholar, and we talk about the regional issue and also uh, Myanmar issue.
While in Indonesia, we are much more diverse than even Myanmar.
Really?
Indonesia, as you know, is a huge archipelago comprising, over 17,000 islands, with over 700 different ethnic groups with different languages. Um, in terms of race, I'm of Malay race, but I'm from a ethnic group called Minangkabau. The majority of Indonesians are the Javanese. They make up 60% of the Indonesian population. They mostly live in Central Java and East Java. But the national language is Bahasa Indonesia, which is derived more from Malay. So we have some more similarity with the Malaysia. So it is a national language which has now been adopted by UNESCO as one of their international languages in UNESCO since 2023. Unlike in Myanmar, where the Burmans are the majority, and then
Right.
seems to be much more dominant. In Indonesia, it was already a consensus when we established the nation state that we will not use the dominant language or call Indonesia Java, because that will be rejected by the other groups. As I said, there are over different or more than 700 different ethnic groups. So as I said, I'm from Minangkabau, from West Sumatra, which is one of the minority groups, but quite active in the nationalist movement. So from the very beginning, the national identity has been based on unity in diversity. That is the Indonesian logo, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity. So one nation, the Indonesian nation, to which everybody has equal shares. There's no majority shareholder and minority shareholders. Everyone, regardless of how big or how small, has equal share and equal stake in the nation. So that this is very much a constructed identity. The majority of Indonesians are Muslims. Over 80% of Indonesians are Muslims. But Islam is not the religion of the state. Indonesia recognizes at least 5 official religions: Islam, Christianity, Protestantism, Catholicism, Hinduism, and Buddhism. We celebrate all of these religious holidays as national holidays. And since the Reformations and democratization, we also recognize the Confucianism as part of the religion that we recognize, and we also celebrate the Chinese New Year now as national holiday. So that is very much, this unity and diversity. Indonesian history is very much parallel with Myanmar, but we have a different trajectory in that.
Right. I mean, Indonesia is much diversity, but not uh, not divided much. I mean, compared to
We had
Myanmar.
problems in the
I mean,
50s. The history of Indonesia and Myanmar is very similar. We had regional rebellions. We had secessionist movements in Aceh. We still have some problems in Papua, but overall, yeah, we are a unitary state, but with a wide-ranging regional autonomy.
right, but you don't have separatists nowadays, right? No rebellion.
Still, in Papua, there's still an active separatist movement, but it's been ongoing for over 5 decades. But on the whole, it is manageable. You know, it's not easy, but the issues of identities remain very much contested still. In Aceh, if you're familiar,
Right,
there's ongoing, it's a long lasting conflict there, and it only came about after the tsunami, which killed over 120,000 people. So that, I think, brought senses to both the national government, to the military, and to the people in Aceh who were fighting for independence. You know, we need to reconstruct Aceh. There should be peace there. So there's an agreement.
so you can say
Peace. Yeah.
Aceh is Aceh, the rebellion is ended because of tsunami.
The tsunami triggered it, but it was a political commitment then, you know, because we need to rebuild, yeah, and in order to rebuild the country, in order to rebuild Aceh, to bring prosperity, peace is needed. You cannot get humanitarian access if there's conflict. Nobody wants to go there. You cannot really reconstruct the devastation if there's no investment. And who's going to invest if there's continuing fighting there? So,
Right.
so both sides compromised. The state, the central government compromised, and the Free Aceh movement also compromised. They put the interests of the wider people, you know, above their own pride and egos.
Right. So it means Aceh case uh, disaster plus the willingness of the people from both Aceh uh, people and the central Indonesian government, their willingness that made the end of the rebellion in Aceh, right?
Yes, the willingness, and also, of course, as help from outside. As you know, the Aceh peace process was mediated by Mati Antasari from Finland.
I see.
Yeah, so he got the Nobel Prize for that actually.
I see. I mean that's very good case. I mean, but in case of uh, Burma, in case of Myanmar, it's different from Indonesia. The central government has almost no willingness, and the uh, the separatists are very wide in case of Myanmar, you know, and
Yes,
all
yeah,
kind
there's
of
so many
group,
different, yeah, yeah.
all kind of groups are rebelling, you know, not just minority ethnic group, even majority ethnic group, everybody are rebelling nowadays, you know. You can see every state and every provinces, there is a rebellion in Myanmar. That is different from Indonesia because Indonesia, big islands, majority there were never rebellion, right? Only those
No, there were. If you look at, as I said, you know, I studied uh, Southeast Asian history and politics. I did a paper on Burma at the time. As I said, you know, the trajectory of the history between Indonesia and Myanmar is very similar. Indonesia is colonized by the Dutch. Myanmar is colonized by the British. And then the Japanese came. The Japanese trained Indonesian young people to become soldiers and to fight against the Dutch, while the Japanese also trained the young
armies.
people in Myanmar, yeah, the Burmese, like Aung San, General Aung San, and so on.
Right,
The role, yeah, the role of religion, the Sangha, the monastery, then, you know, was the Buddhist monks, and also very politicized. While in Indonesia, the Muslim Islamic groups are also politicized. They fought for nationalism. both Indonesia and Burma then experimented with liberal democracy, constitutional democracy in the 1950s. But then there were problems with regional rebellions. In Indonesia, we had regional rebellions. Then we had the Islamic groups who wanted to establish an Islamic state. We also had a very determined communist group. So there's ideological conflicts, the regional conflicts, and so on. So the constitutional experiment failed. The same happened in Myanmar. The military became dominant. But then there's the trajectory, when the time of UNU and the time of the Indonesian political leaders, they were the idealists. They experimented with democracy, but both failed. Then in Indonesia, Sukarno took over. He did away with constitutional democracy. He had what is so-called guided democracy. The guided democracy at the time was Sukarno was at the top, with the army, the military, and the Communist Party basically supporting him. But then Indonesia, like Myanmar, it's a non-aligned country, supposed to be free and active. So when Sukarno flirted too much to the left, he was seen as being too pro-Beijing. That led to a movement against him. He was accused also of, being supportive, not critical of the move against the army, the right-wing army. So that led to Sukarno's downfall in 1965. After that, the Indonesian army controlled the whole of Indonesia, the new order government. That lasted for 32 years. In Myanmar, Ne Win took over the military. But the difference is, in Indonesia, it was the military believed that in order to control the country, they needed to develop the economy. They said that the only way to fight communism, the only way to fight secessionist movements, is not simply through military force, but you need to win the hearts and minds through economic development, and that's the difference.
But I don't know much about Indonesia history, but I guess compared to Burmese military, Indonesia military, it seems they are more professional military and more standard army, and they are not much politicizing in military in Indonesia.
Oh, very much politics. Yeah. No, that is wrong, John. I mean, the whole of the New Order period is the military controlling. So the dual function of the military throughout the New Order period, the military regarded itself not simply as the guardian of the state, but that it was also not just a defense force, but also a social political force. So the military really was very dominant. But at the same time, it did not believe in direct rule through coup d'etat. So it always had tried to legitimize its rule. The Indonesian original 1945 constitution allowed for the appointment of functional group in parliament. And the military used this door to be appointed to have reserved seats in parliament. Now, I could tell you that towards the late 1990s, 2000s, I traveled to Myanmar when before the Reformasi in Indonesia, before the economic crisis and the downfall of Suharto, in preparing Myanmar's entry into ASEAN, we from Indonesia traveled to Myanmar at the time, saying, maybe you could borrow a leaf from the Indonesian side. The military could still be in control, but there is a fig leaf at the time, that it is supposed to be more legitimate, and there's a Golkar, which is a military-backed political party, which always won the election, but at least there was a fiction of election. So the New Order government under Suharto was still considered to be internationally quite respectable, although not immune from criticism because of human rights abuses, democratic constrictions, and also the Indonesia's, forceful take over East Timor and the policy of continuing human rights abuses there at the time. So Indonesia at the time was actively engaging with the Burmese military. And after the Reformasi, after the fall of Suharto, and we ended the dual function of the military, I personally was also involved. I attended a number of seminars because I was very involved with the Habibie government, the transition period. And we invited also leaders from Myanmar, the Habibie Center, personally, the center that I worked. We invited MPs from the different ethnic groups to come to Indonesia. We also through the Indonesian, through the Bali Democracy Forum, Institute for Peace and Democracy, which President Yudhoyono set up. We also invited governors, the military governors in Myanmar who are in charge of all of those states. Invited them, and we talk about the experience of Aceh. So there's very intensive interaction. At that time, in the early 2000s, there was, as you know, there was a lot of optimism that the military would be willing to share power. Through electoral process, Indonesia had a military, former military activist. General Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono was as a military man, but democratically elected as president. Prabowo is now a former general who had been out of favor and now elected. But unfortunately, things seem to have changed. So there was some hope in the beginning, but seems, I don't know. I'm not that familiar now with what is going on. Why this return to this hotline attitude again?
Okay. So, can you say current Indonesia President Bombo is a fellow of Suharto, or it's the same group or different group?
He's a son-in-law. He was a former son-in-law of President Suharto.
So very close. He is very much in line with Suharto.
Very much so. And in fact, now in Indonesia, there is a movement to rewrite Indonesian history. So Indonesia, in the past 5 years, has suffered from democratic regression, starting from President Joko Widodo. President Joko Widodo invited a lot of active military personnel again into the bureaucracy. Now, according to the Reformasi law on the military, law number 2004, there were only 9 agencies in which active military personnel were allowed. For example, like search and rescue, or National Intelligence Agency, or the Ministry of Defense, for example. Then you could have, or the military secretary at the president's office. Then you could have active military personnel. Beyond that, if they want to run for election, of course, they have to retire from the military. But they're not supposed to sit in other bureaucracies. But then President Joko Widodo appointed a number of active military personnel into agencies that were not among the 9. And now, this year, very speedily, the law has been revised, and now they allow active military personnel to occupy civilian positions in 14 bureaucratic agencies. And this has created a lot of resistance. There have been a lot of criticisms of the return of the military into Indonesian politics. And with this rewriting of the history, a 10-volume revision of Indonesian history, there are concerns that what happened in the 1997, 1998, or about the various violations committed by President Suharto, or even implicated when Lieutenant General Prabowo was very much part of that order, could be rewritten, reconstructed in a way that would maybe whitewash, that history. Yeah, that in fact moves to make President Suharto a national hero. This has created again a growing resistance. So if you Google Indonesia national history being rewritten, there are a lot of controversies about this and about the military revision. So Indonesia is still very much a work in progress. Our democracy it's like a dance. It moves forward and then it moves sideways and then it moves back.
Right.
Uh,
So,
yeah.
so which means you are worried about the current administration is returning back to pro-military system in the past.
There are concerns. I mean, I'm not worried that the government will do away with electoral elections, because elections are now seen as ways of legitimately obtaining power and maintaining
Right.
power. Everybody has equal access to that. Although there have been talks about, it's too expensive and they're trying to democracy is much more expensive than authoritarianism, when it comes to electing a leader. But the legitimacy issue is very important. But for Indonesia, the years 21st of May was the 27 years of Reformasi, the fall of Suharto. So there's a lot of articles, are we going forward or are we back to the ground zero, to the point, the point where Reformasi has stopped basically and going back. If you look at all the political analysis and so on, there's a lot of gloomy predictions, concerns about the narrowing of the space. At the moment, Indonesia, I could say, we still have the freedom to speak, but increasingly there have been using different kind of laws. Freedom of speech has been curtailed. There have been a number of journalists and critics who landed who've been arrested using this electronic transaction law, the about hate speech and so on. Though the Constitutional Court, our Constitutional Court, which is a Reformasi product, has issued a law, has issued a ruling recently, brought about by a number of civil society activists, that if you criticize government institutions or individuals who hold power, then that could not be regarded as hate speech. So if you're criticizing the president or a cabinet minister, according to the earlier interpretation of the law, they could sue you as part of hate speech. But now, according to this constitutional ruling, that is not considered as hate speech. It's considered to be part of free speech. So hopefully, the contestations between the attempt to control, to stabilize, and to return some sort of military influence will also be countered vigorously by those who care about democracy. And civil society in Indonesia has been very active and continues to be very vibrant. Hopefully, the space will not be closed too much.
So it means it is a concern, as you said, concern about more restriction and more military involvement in the administration nowadays. But I don't think Indonesia will be broke down democracy. It won't happen, I guess, because after Indonesia turned from military rule to democracy system, you never has broken down, right? Not like Burma.
No, we have been stable.
Burma has many times broken down democracy, even though the military, they themselves allow them to become democracy, but they violated and broken down again and again. So that is the thing in Burma. But Indonesia case, not the case like that.
I think we are also, concerned. There's always this fear that in Indonesia, we never take our national unity for granted. Because the issues of national cohesion has been very much there now. But there's a different approach. Under the New Order government, the previous government under Suharto, in order to maintain national unity, the military felt that it had to control everything through force, but at the same time through economic development. But then the legitimacy pillar of the government depended very much on success, that it had to deliver economic success all the time. As long as the economic growth was high, as long as it was able to distribute social welfare, then the support for government was strong. So government was able to stay for 32 years with minor dissents. There was dissent in Aceh, continuing dissent in Papua, and various protests. But the control was tight because Indonesia is regarded as one of the 10 economic miracles. But then you had the economic crisis. With the economic crisis, overnight, the economic achievements were nearly wiped out. So you had people who are suffering again. A lot of people lost their jobs, and people had to queue for basic necessities. There's shortage of food, shortage of fuel. Students were suffering, and so on. So you had the whole country ups in arms.
Right.
So that meant, yeah. So the once the pillar of legitimacy, economic development, fell, there's nothing to prop up the system. It's not just the government that fell. The whole state apparatus lost the authority, lost legitimacy in the eye of the public. So that's why Indonesia moved towards reformasi, rapid democratization, sharing the burdens of governments and blames and success, between the executive, legislative, the judiciary, allowing wider political participation so that people have a sense of stake, sense of belonging. At the same time, wide-ranging regional autonomy, because the regions felt that they've been colonized by Java, by Jakarta. So there's real feeling of disenchantment, no sense of support. So this was, I was part of the President Habibie's government in 1998-99 during the transition to democracy. And President Habibie said, in order to ensure that the state and the Indonesian nation state remain stable, we cannot depend on only one pillar. We need to have not just economic pillar, but we have to have the political pillar, the social pillar, so that if one, like a table, a three-legged table, a four-legged table will always be more stable than a one-legged table. So that is why Indonesia feels that democracy, political participation, decentralization is very much in support of national unity, of national resilience. Yeah. So you cannot, the military cannot enforce control all the time. It has to have the support of the people, and economic development will not always grow. There'll be a financial crisis. There'll be, like we had the pandemic. It's beyond the control of the nation state, and you need to have other sources of strength for the state, and there, the support of the people, the willing support of the people, not the fearful support of the people, is critical for national resilience.
Sure. In case Indonesia, as you said, the people has willingness and the government has willingness and the military is willing to promote, or as you said, reformation and economic growth. Every eyes in Indonesia, they accept that economic improving is a kind of legitimacy. Any government and civilians or even military, if they improve economy, Indonesian I see some kind of legitimacy. But the interesting in case of Indonesia is you never broke down democracy after the end of the military regime in Indonesia. That is one thing. And again, Indonesia good point is you continuously promoting and developing economy in Indonesia. I mean, your GDP is continuously up, you never go down. You are now over trillion GDP. In Burmese case, the economy is always go down. That's the thing. Even 50-year, 30-year GDP, and today GDP is the same, almost same, it's never improved. That is the very bad thing in Burmese economy. And as we said, democracy several times broke down in Burma. So those are different factors between Indonesia and Myanmar. And Indonesia military behavior is also different from Burmese military behavior. And Burmese military behavior not like Indonesia. They don't have willingness for any pure reformation because they themselves allow them, example, even though people dislike the 2008 constitution and people not much supported military-led reformation, but even their own imposed constitution and their own well-defined, well-drafted constitution, they violated that constitution by themselves, and that broke down. That this coup is they violated 2008 constitution itself. So these you can see not standard army and not willingness sincerely by Burmese military. And that is the factor. Also, different thing is the Suharto and Newin is very much different things. Suharto and Newin behavior is different. Suharto case, he decided whatever he decided, he did it. And I mean, he also military dictator, but Nevin case, he never has sincere heart. That is different. Suharto probably I can say he has very sincere heart. He did bad thing, but he changed. Then he changed it completely, sincerely. But Nevin, he never sincerely changed it. He has always behind agenda or behind the screen has something he want to do. Even he not really sincerely give up because it's unavoidable reason in 1988 he just give up, the power. It's like that. So these are different, behavior between Indonesia and Burmese military, many factors. And Indonesia military, I don't think you have a socialist ideology or any left-wing ideology from the beginning from the foundation of the military in Indonesia. But the Burmese case, that is the problem. Because they are, even though they are saying national army, they are very much correlated with socialist ideology, socialist political party. It's not should not happen in military. It's never based on ideology. They should based on their own military standard discipline. That is the difference probably between military in Indonesia.
Yeah, we were hoping that once Myanmar is part of ASEAN, part of the regional family, we can all learn from each other's mistakes and benchmark from each other's success. We are all learning from our most successful neighbors. So there is, we don't want to give up on Myanmar, but at the same time, it is the fact of matter now that, ASEAN is judged as failing. One of the KPIs of the ASEAN chair is to solve the Myanmar issue. But I say, of course, it's beyond any external powers capacity to solve conflict within a particular country. But within ASEAN, with starting with the 5-point consensus in 2021, which was agreed upon in Indonesia, although Indonesia was not chair of ASEAN at the time, the top is stopping the violence, and then allowing humanitarian access and appointing an envoy, meeting with all parties and having an inclusive dialogue and so on, and there's not much going forward. So really, at the end of the day, uh, this this hopelessness, but at the same time, we do not want to give up on Myanmar. And here I'm an academic now, so I can be more blunt. It is also unfair to ASEAN, that it seems to be held hostage by the situation in one of its member states when we have so many other challenges, with regional and global challenges during this very difficult time. So we really hope that, as I said, the experience, according to history, the most similar trajectory of our history in terms of historical, colonial experience, as well as the diversity and the various conflicts and experiment of liberal democracy, military rule, the politicized military. Indonesia and Myanmar is the one that's the most parallel. So we hope that there should be some lessons learned.
Right. So Indonesia is much better. I mean, in terms of the reformation, but in case of Burma, reformation is totally failed and repeatedly failed, and the willingness is not there among military, and Indonesia are more professional military, I guess. All military officers
yeah.
qualified.
We want to have a professional Indonesian military, not military that is interested in doing business and politics. We are still a long way from that. That is, one of the writing I wrote was ensuring democratic civilian control of the military, and it seems to be not there yet. We have not really totally consolidated our democracy even after 27 years, because the civilians themselves lack the self-confidence to ensure democratic civilian.
We are already talking about how ASEAN role will be better to improve Myanmar case, and you are expert on Indonesia foreign policy and as well as ASEAN, and as you said, the five-point consensus was initiated for solving Burmese crisis, but it is not working, as much as expected, and military not really keep the five-point consensus. They did not keep it at all. I think even they never look it back. Probably the military general they throw away from the table probably. So then ASEAN, as probably you said, that is very ASEAN has very limitation or very less option to deal Burmese case, but you know very much about ASEAN, and now ASEAN is too much based on government, government approach, only government representative, government delegate. But if we see the whole ASEAN region as a community, and there's a track one as government and track two like academician, non-government, and other expertise. You don't see the track two non-government role, and it should involve bigger role in ASEAN, even solving Burmese crisis. I saw many times ASEAN chairmanship and policymaker not effectively they have done any policy, and they did not hit any point to tackle, for example, in Burmese case, the crisis in Burma. I see they are more capable of non-government, track to not represented by government will have more knowledge and more expertise for policy making in ASEAN. Because without policy, clear policy, you cannot do next step practical thing, you cannot really go. Now, most of the time, without clear policy, approaching Burma is they will never hit the point. Only they are, hitting the bush around in case of Burma. And most, in fact, those ASEAN leaders may not pay attention because they said that is not my country simply. And why I have to be heritage for Burma, I was more concerned about my own Malaysia, my own Thailand. That already happened in reality like this. So how do you see academic sector or expertise, non-government side track to should be involved in wider role and how to reform in ASEAN? I've been talking with one of Malaysian professor how we can reform ASEAN. He said we need a good leader for ASEAN. And also we talk about ASEAN Secretary General, a lot of ASEAN Secretary General office are bureaucrat. They are all a government representative and most policy maker bureaucrat, but very limited involvement of expertise, non-government side, academician or expertise. So how do you see ASEAN reformation and ASEAN role?
I think there are a lot of issues here. Setting Myanmar aside, we are talking about how ASEAN is constructed. As you know very well, that ASEAN is constructed as an intergovernmental organization. At the beginning, it's just a very minimalist association linking the foreign ministry. It was very much a foreign minister's project. It was only later on that economic issues are brought in, and then now we have the desire to bring ASEAN into a truly people-centered, people-driven ASEAN. Yeah, we have an ASEAN community with the three pillars: ASEAN Political Security Community, ASEAN Economic Community, ASEAN Social Cultural Community. A community implies that there are people within it. But in reality, ASEAN is still very much governmental and elite-driven. And of course, the Secretary General is a representative from the members' government, not the members, not the countries. But if you look at, it says ASEAN member states. It doesn't say ASEAN member countries. So it's the states which are the primary constituents of ASEAN. So I agree that, if we are serious about developing an ASEAN community, more conscious efforts need to be carried out to bring the people in. But that is still very much top down. It seems, the people are there by the grace of the government. If they open the windows, then people can peek. And the windows sometimes open and sometimes close. And if you look at the member states of ASEAN, civil society organizations are not all active in every member states. Right. Until 2000, once ASEAN started to talk about community, there was a conscious effort to have greater participations of the wider grouping NGOs, including hosting an ASEAN People's Assembly, which non-governmental organizations would carry out. But the last one was carried out in Malaysia in 2015. Not every ASEAN country was able to host or willing to host an ASEAN People's Assembly because they do not really seriously want to bring people in. And in fact, in some member states, when they're supposed to have NGO, they have a gongo, government, non-governmental organizations, very much government sponsored. So this is a challenge because there is a real democracy deficit in all ASEAN countries. Even democratic ASEAN, even countries that are already democratic, like Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, we are all flawed democracy. We are all, our rank is still below full democracy. So this is an issue. But I take your point about the need to bring in more civil society here, and here it's not the government bringing in, civil society also seizing the opportunities. In Myanmar, there used to be a very active uh, Myanmar caucus in ASEAN parliaments. I know that Indonesian parliamentarians, for example, there's a very strong ASEAN caucus campaigning at the time for the release of Aung San Suu Kyi from her earlier imprisonment. So there's a lot of pressure from parliaments as well. But the setting of ASEAN, has a built-in flaw. ASEAN has a charter, it has norms, it has values, it has rules, but no enforcement mechanism. So if a member states violate the one of the norms, for example, about constitutional change of government, there's a language in the ASEAN Charter saying that the member state should not carry out unconstitutional change of government. But what happens if they do? There's no mechanism. So we need to revisit the ASEAN Charter, which was signed in 2007 and ratified 2008. It's been 17 years already. The ASEAN member states overemphasize the non-interference in each other's internal affairs. That is not an ASEAN ruling. That is in the UN Charter. But in the UN Charter, we also have the doctrine of responsibility to protect. So, if a member state, other countries should not intervene in the elections or how a particular country should be run. But if there are huge violations of human rights, or if there's a disaster and then the national government refuses foreign assistance, humanitarian access, for example, like the case of Nargis in Myanmar, and then there could be pressure from outside. You need to protect the interests of the wider community. But ASEAN still, despite the fact that the new values are there already in the charter, the old values is respect for territorial integrity, respect for national unity, non-interference in each other's internal affairs. But there are new values also in the ASEAN Charter about democracy, human rights, good governance, constitutional change of government. But if you listen to all ASEAN leaders, they only emphasize the old ASEAN way and neglect the new ways. And we need to bring these conversations back. I've raised these issues, for a while. But when it comes to Myanmar, ASEAN, I think, has started itself unnecessarily in the foot. Because instead of having in the five-point consensus, it talks about an ASEAN envoy. It doesn't say an ASEAN chair's envoy. But that is what ASEAN has done. So every time the chair changes every year, it has a new envoy. And as you know very well, it takes time to build trust. For how could someone learn about the complexity, the dynamics of a country like Myanmar, which is extremely complicated, if the envoy keeps changing every year? He will not know the people, or she will not know, and the people will not know him or her. So you have this system which only panders to the vanity of the ASEAN member states, unwillingness to have a Thai being an envoy of ASEAN, or an Indonesian being an envoy, or Philippines. The Brunei wants an envoy, a Singaporean wants an envoy, a Vietnamese wants an envoy. So instead of looking at the issue, the merit of the issue, they put their own national interest first. They're not putting the interests of the regional system. So there are a lot of things that needs to be done. So even without bringing the track 2, if the track 1 gets its act together and be willing to put regional resilience, the interest of the region and the effectiveness of ASEAN before the mutual distrust, suspicions, we don't want a Thai to be an envoy and using ASEAN names, or we don't want an Indonesian, or we don't want Malaysian, then they're unnecessarily putting a ball and chain on ASEAN's ability to move on Myanmar.
Right. So as you point out correctly, that envoy keep changing every year, and every new envoy, he has to start beginning learning uh, a new things like for him or for her, any envoy. So that is the problem of one envoy is one thing, and if the one only one is continuously doing within 5 years, he could learn completely very well about the situation in Myanmar, and he can uh, start uh, solving the problem. But we can never go to next step because a new envoy come in and he start learning first step, and another envoy come in learning first step. They could never go for second step to deal the problem. So that is the dilemma in ASEAN envoy. And I don't know, that is one thing. How do you have idea this system to solve it? We can have a kind of envoy groups, or I mean, those envoy groups should be one voice. All previous and new envoys should be together, and also including other expertise policymaker should not abandon the old one who already learned the previous envoy, who know well. He start understanding, then his time is finished. Like that. So how can you put idea in this envoy system? It can able to maintain continuously those previous envoy and current envoy together. And I mean, people may be changed, but the understanding and the knowledge and those envoy capacity should not be changed. So how do you have idea how to reform
ASEAN has tried to overcome some of these problems by having this troika system. So the previous chair, the current chair, and the forthcoming chair will work together so that they will have some continuity. When Indonesia was chair, Indonesia set up the office of an ASEAN envoy. So the office, yeah. So it tries to build an institutional memory within the Indonesian Foreign Ministry, because, as you know, if you have an envoy who is an ambassador, who is or someone who is a government official attached to the Foreign Ministry, they move somewhere else, and they lose that understanding. So I think that it's a good idea if the Foreign Ministry of each member state has a dedicated office for an ASEAN envoy. If they're not willing to go for an ASEAN envoy, one person, but at least there should be an office. But ideally, this is my suggestion that I've been putting forward, that we should set up a voice of an ASEAN envoy with a secretariat at the ASEAN Secretariat, with a secretarial support, maybe from the ASEAN Secretariat, and then whoever becomes an envoy maybe does it for 3 years, for example. All the documents, all the knowledge should be deposited, be put in the secretariat, so that the connections, the network are there available, and there should be some people who should be retained. And as I said, it's not just about the envoy learning who's who in Myanmar, not just in Yangon and Naypyidaw, but also in different states, and also in exiles in Bangkok and elsewhere. But those people need to know and trust, the envoy, because if they don't trust them, how would they be willing to open up? And then, and where should they meet? We can go back. We had done this before. Indonesia helped with the Cambodian crisis. Indonesia carried out the so-called, first it started with a cocktail party, and then it was a Jakarta informal meeting, bringing the different factions to Jakarta. At first, they didn't meet immediately. They met in different rooms, so the Indonesian side went, to different meetings, and then worked as a facilitator. But you need to build the trust first. So the Troika needs to build a system where the knowledge could be shared, and then carried forth. But ideally, I hope that the ASEAN leaders, if not at the leaders level, but the ASEAN foreign ministers could agree to do away with this individual egos and really appoint a serious envoy who is knowledgeable, who is respected, who has some experience in facilitation, mediation work. We have Vice President Yusuf Kala in Indonesia is very experienced. He mediated in the internal conflicts between the Christians and the Muslims in Ambon when they were killing, in the late 90s and early 2000s, where the killings between the Muslims and the Christians. Vice President Yusuf Kala, mediated in that. And there's also killing in Poso. He was also very active in the Aceh peace process. We have people from Malaysia who also assisted in the negotiations between the government in Manila and the people in southern Philippines, the Muslims there. We have people experienced in Thailand. There are many experienced individuals, people who have experience in the UN system. Why not make use of that and focus on the goal, not on who represents which country.
Right.
I think ASEAN should be big enough to, the ASEAN member states should be big enough not to be so petty about that.
So, Professor Dewi, what about apart from envoy, isn't better we should also have deputy envoy? It should not be from government appointee. It should be from non-government sector, academician, expertise, and all policy maker, researcher should be gathering and always be keep in touch as a group. All kind of expertise should be accepted, it should not be restricted, in that group, so that you can get many options and wider knowledge and wider policy ideal in order to solve the problem. So
yes,
appointing
they should be researchers. John,
right.
Researchers and academics can be used as resource people. They should open up, but you have to be realistic. A general is not going to listen to an academic. A general will maybe listen to another general, or a politician could probably also, listen to another politician. So sometimes rank matters. Knowledge, unfortunately, sometimes gets less regarded as positions. So I would argue, why not get someone who is probably a former president, a former vice president, a former prime minister, a former foreign minister, someone who has the rank and the respect, and can draw from a wide knowledge of experience. So academics, civil societies are very important. When we are talking about, for example, a commissioner in the ASEAN, in HR, ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, Indonesia appoints someone from real NGO, from non-government organization, from civil society. So does Myanmar. So does Malaysia. But many countries appoint government bureaucrats. So I think that when we want to strengthen human rights bodies, we should appoint somebody who is from civil society. But when we want someone who is able to reach the different groups, there should be probably a pool of people, but maybe led by one person, who has access to people in the Kachin state, who has access to people in the Shan state, who has, who can communicate with someone in the current state, who can communicate with the military, who can communicate with NUG representatives. Maybe different individuals, but they should all be under the office of the special envoy. But there should be one one cook, one head chef, put it that way.
Right.
Otherwise, if I'm mixing my metaphor, there are too many chefs in the kitchen, they might serve different recipes, and it will not be so tasty.
No, yes, it's true. And the thing is, in case of Burmese crisis, we don't have, I think we still don't have clear policy and very solid policy, you know. It's mean many people are doing, but still I found it's not yet completely and solid policy yet done, you know. They are doing, but it is not uh, able to solve the problem. The policy itself is not yet done. So
Yeah.
what the interesting is you said that Indonesia set up envoy office. That's good thing. How to say those government level engagement. The envoy is that should be there. Envoy should
I
be
think it should be not somebody who is holding an office. Maybe it should be somebody who is already retired. Because if he's holding an office, it would actually be very difficult because it's difficult for him or her to divorce himself for that position.
right. So I mean, envoy can be current ASEAN's government appointee. That can be remain, you know, that can be remain, but deputy should be not be the government appointee, and it can be from non-government sector, you know, deputy envoy should be, and it should be not limited 1 year, as long as the necessary, as long as fit, we can keep deputy for a long time for solving the problem, to remain all this knowledge and all this strategy to
Yeah.
be maintained by the deputy. That should be there. And then, you know, the deputy can collect all kind of policy maker and expertise, not only government appointee, everybody within ASEAN who are expert policy inside the country or outside the country, whoever, as long as they are good in policy, expert in policy, they should accept that. That will benefit for the envoy. So the deputy can collect all those things, and even you can uh, uh, accept, ASEAN should accept even a Burmese expert, it can be also a deputy envoy, something like, because he not necessary to meet with the military head or any stakeholder. He can be behind. He can do
definitely because
envoy work behind the screen.
because the ability to communicate, because you need local language also. Yeah, so you need to have people also working in that. You need the most important thing, that's a willingness.
Right.
We need to be patient, but on the other hand, if if you are too patient, nothing's get done. but in terms of the envoy's work, it has to be multi-years. It cannot be 1 year.
Right. Especially deputy, deputy envoy should be not limited for 1 year. But because of envoy is because ASEAN system.
So to overcome this, first the troika, then maybe the assistants or the deputies, but they should set up this office of an ASEAN envoy, maybe have a secretariat at the ASEAN secretariat. So has the repository of all the knowledge, information in one place.
Right.
Instead of only in each other's foreign ministry, where the filing cannot be accessed, by all those who need to have access to that.
So Indonesia not yet set up the envoy office in ASEAN Secretary General office.
No, there should be an ASEAN decision. There should be a collective ASEAN decision.
It is not yet done.
No, ASEAN only has an office. The Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi set up an ASEAN envoy office within the Indonesian Foreign Ministry.
I see. Only Indonesian office, not regional
not
ASEAN.
An ASEAN office. Yeah. So what I'm suggesting is have an office in the ASEAN Secretariat, which could be accessed by all of the ASEAN member states.
So it's a good idea. Why don't ASEAN set up in ASEAN Secretary General at least? We can start.
Yeah. That is my suggestion. So that the various ASEAN chairs could deposit the finding, the networks, the WhatsApp numbers, the emails, all the contracts in one place. Yeah. And then, as you suggested, have some assistants who are permanent, who manage to do the groundwork, to do the connecting inside Myanmar and outside Myanmar.
Right.
That could be local Myanmar activists.
Right. I don't know, current chairman Anwar, he has such idea, and anybody can help him, or can you directly talk to?
Well, I'm supposed to get, as part of my Pok Rafiah chair, I have to give a public speech, a public lecture on ASEAN Day. I'll mention this in my speech also.
And probably, why don't you directly approach to Anwar to put such thing as we discussed, ASEAN?
I was part of this eminent person group. I've already made that suggestion, so I don't know. When we talk about Myanmar,
you already made suggestion.
I already made that suggestion in one of our consultative eminent person group. I'm part of this. If you can see that, we had a meeting a few weeks ago. So this is ASEAN Circle of Eminent Person Asset Track 2 consultation to give inputs to the current ASEAN chair. This was carried out by a think tank, by the ASEAN ISIS Malaysia, where Myanmar was one of the issues that we talked about exhaustively, as well as reform of ASEAN. And the problem with one of the weaknesses that we have in dealing with Myanmar, because the problem in the structure of ASEAN itself, so we need to overcome this. Yeah.
Right. That's problem within ASEAN, and also ASEAN envoy issue. We need to do more specifically, more detail, because we just put envoy and he doesn't have any supporting, policy or material, any deposit, he just empty hand going and coming, something like that. So it is not working, and again, every year changing. So we need more fruitful envoy office should be here, and I think we should.
And being the envoy is a full-time job. If you have a sitting foreign minister of an ASEAN member state becoming the ASEAN envoy, he's busy. A foreign minister has other responsibilities. Myanmar is not the only issue that a cabinet minister, a foreign minister, has to deal with. Yeah, so you need to have someone who will be thinking and working on it 24/7.
Right.
For at least 3 years. Yeah.
Sure. So we need very much deputy envoy or assistant envoy, something like that, who can work full time, So that is Professor Dewi, you should ask Chairman, ASEAN Chairman Anwar to set up again. So, but I don't know, ASEAN has a budget problem or any such financial problem. How do you think?
Well, ASEAN always go cap in hand to the dialogue partners. So this is maybe, we need to work with our dialogue partners, with Japan, with China, with India, with the EU, and so on.
So it will be budget issue is not that problem, I guess. Just for putting.
It's a political will.
Right. I mean,
yeah, but money is not easy, but money can be found if there is a willingness,
right?
Purpose to do that.
So that means ASEAN Chairman Anwar motive is important, currently. He should.
We need because we have good chair now. We have Malaysia, but the next one is the Philippines, which is also usually a strong chair.
Right.
So let's hope that some progress could be made.
Right.
There's also the ASEAN Secretariat. It doesn't really have the kind of political authority when it comes to political security issues. Still very much in member states, yeah. But in this case, I think that it could be used as a neutral space.
Right.
While the member states continue to retain the decision-making process. It's not taken over by the Secretary General. The Secretary General has more authority on economic issues, on social cultural issue, but when it comes to political security, even in the EU, it's usually the member states that are more, more authoritative on that. They're not willing to give up that authority. But when it comes to the Myanmar issue, because it's a very comprehensive issue, it's not a political security issue only, it's an economy issue, it's a humanitarian issue, social cultural issue. So, we need to be able to deal it in a much more systemic and through a more regional system matter.
When I see a lot of ASEAN meetings, most are government-oriented and government-representative think tanks, and very rare from non-government side, So I surprised, especially in Burmese case, inside Burma, no think tank or no academician can freely speak out, and even they have very limited knowledge to share for ASEAN. Because Burmese case, I know because nobody want to say bad thing, So then how you can get perfect information and perfect policy from inside the government? It is not possible. You can never get any very good information and idea from inside Burma. So mostly ASEAN should know the Burmese case has to rely on outside Burmese to be more standard knowledge or standard policy.
I've been both a bureaucrat and an academic, so I can see from both sides. Academics tend to be very idealistic and see, absolutism, the perfect things. But when you're in government, you work on what is possible, because the choice is not always between the bad and the good. The choice is usually between the bad, the less bad, and what are the trade-offs. And ignoring local knowledge inside Myanmar will be unrealistic, because you need to deal with that. So when I say compromise in Myanmar, it also has to come to compromise from the non-government state actors as well. Those who are opposed to the military also needs to be able to compromise. It has to be less perfect. Do not go for perfection, because your perfection is somebody else's nightmare. So it has to be something that is acceptable, minimally acceptable. If everybody is unhappy with a particular solution, then maybe it is the best solution because no one is completely winning.
Probably.
Yeah. So now, if I can say this, when I talk to friends, Myanmar, I wear hats. I'm both in my bio. I said, I straddle the world of academia, government, and civil society. I've been an academic. I'm continue to be an academic. I've been in government. I'm in civil society. I chair a think tank, and so on. But I'm a researcher in the government state institution. I faced my colleagues when I was in the Habibie government. I faced backlash from my academic colleagues because I said this reformasi is imperfect. You should never work with the military. You should never work with Gorkha. Gorkha should be banned. The military should be disbanded. We completely make new one. But if you do go that way, they'll fight back. Look at what happened in Egypt when you excluded the old regime completely, put them in jails or get them out. They fight back. They would always do. That's human nature. So what we do is imperfection. So now in Indonesia, we have a very messy democratic reform. We call it like pocho-pocho, a dance. Move one way forward, two ways sideways, and one step back, and then move again, hopefully more steps. So the whole idea is always not compromise only from the military. You need to be able to get compromises from the warlords in the various states who are voting independence. I think for the military, independence is a non-negotiable. They will never give up. Yeah.
You must engage,
must
engage with all kinds of people.
Yeah. So the zero-sum game, I win and you lose, is never going to be acceptable to anybody.